Early signing day is behind us. LSU signed all 27 of their commitments on early signing day. We'll do a full recap of what LSU's 2024 class looks like with Brian Smith.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On LSU podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today's edition of Locked On LSU, as all of our recruiting content, is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Early signing day is behind us. LSU signed all 27 of their commitments, and joining us to break it all down is Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, who I know has been having the easiest, super chill, most carefree days the past couple of days. Just kidding. Brian, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. 27 of 27 commitments have signed with LSU. What does that mean? Is that rare these days to sign all of your commitments? And kind of what does that mean for Brian Kelly and this coaching staff?
It goes back to something we talked about 8 months ago, and that's just the ability to recruit the in-state kids, recruit them hard. They got, I think, 17 are from the boot. And I do believe that they really just focused on the players that wanted to be at LSU, which makes that easier because most teams are going to lose somebody on signing day. And LSU historically has been one of the most volatile schools for getting and losing players right around signing day.
They've been
that way for my entire life.
It's super fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, depends on your perspective, I guess, and how it ends up for your school that year.
Totally.
But they're still in. Yeah. I mean, right now, LSU is in 3 or 4 of those. There's a couple of kids that are, committed to A&M. One of them, Dominic McKinley, we'll discuss, et cetera. There's Terry Bussey, who's committed out there that LSU went to see recently. So there's all kinds of things that can still happen. But I mean, as far as the commitments, yeah, they went high and mighty. They didn't lose anybody. That's always a win.
Always a win. And I think, too, maybe speaks to where the program is at under Brian Kelly. I mean, you think about it, 2021, less than 3 years ago, Brian Kelly took over a program with 40 scholarship players. Now you're looking at a program that can be a little bit pickier and choosier in the transfer portal, that now they're getting up to that 84 scholarship mark, and you're bringing in 27 of those commitments. There's still work to do, of course. You still need to go into the transfer portal, but I at least think that in year 3, or at least going into year 3, positive sign for Brian Kelly and the work that he's doing on the recruiting side of things.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a different kind of team the next few years. Number one, you're losing Jaden Daniels. I get that, but they're going to be able to win in the trenches, kind of old school LSU. They got a few kids that I know will make you very happy that are in the secondary that are very good, like Jawan Johnson, et cetera. Yeah. Worley knows they needed some of that. And they got a really balanced class. Caroline, this is LSU the way it should be traditionally. You look at the class, you don't go, well, wow, they didn't get anybody at this spot. Mm-hmm. It is very balanced. It has a chance to get better still, and there's speed and size everywhere. So this is a very good LSU class.
And you bring up in the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. You cannot win in this league at this level if you're not sound in the trenches on both sides of the ball.
100%.
LSU is going to have some turnover on the offensive line. You at least are bringing back Emory Jones. You're bringing back Will Campbell. You're solidifying your tackle spots. But Charles Turner has just accepted a bid to the Senior Bowl, so he likely will declare for the NFL draft. Instead of coming back to LSU for his final year of eligibility, Marlon Martinez has entered the transfer portal. So not a ton of attrition on the offensive line, but you bring in 5 offensive linemen so far in this class: Ethan Callaway, Weston Davis, Ori Williams, Joseph Cryer, and Kyrie Lee. Maybe not 5 stars, but a good bit of those guys are from the state of Louisiana. They're bringing in at least a lot of depth and a lot of bodies at the offensive line position. Just kind of your take on those 5 guys that LSU is bringing in on the offensive side of things.
I love Callaway. Big time potential, could play right or left. Mm-hmm. And while they have 2 sophomore tackles that everybody in the draft is going to love after another year in Baton Rouge, you got to replace them. And by getting these kids in a year, what Warren under some of the younger guys. One of these guys, maybe Callaway, maybe Stavis, somebody else,
Mhm.
ends up being a starter as a sophomore. So LSU, just, traditionally, they're always massive up front anyway. They're getting the numbers they need. It's funny that you mentioned earlier, like 40 guys on scholarship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really sad at any program, let
You had a
alone.
receiver playing quarterback in a bowl game.
I know, so bad.
It was not that long ago.
But they figured it out rather quickly. This is how you build your program for the long term, though. They can redshirt a few kids. If somebody leaves, they're not going to get completely whitewashed by it. They're back to having a balance and having the size and speed they need. Up front, though, man, they got some big ogres, power. This is what LSU was when I was growing up.
Mhm.
And when you played them, you knew it was going to be a dirty day.
Yeah, that is kind of traditionally what has made LSU so good in the past
Oh,
is
yeah.
just how big, how strong, and how quick they are in the trenches. So offensive line, I said in a podcast last week, I said never underestimate Brad Davis. His recruiting ability, his coaching ability. I mean, I feel probably more confident about the offensive line position now and in the future than I do probably any other position. But looking at the other side of things, the defensive line, Brian, is a concern of mine. Ideally, you bring back Makai Wingo and Mason Smith, and you can bring in that edge rusher ability with Harold Perkins. But that's not a position that was necessarily, I don't want to say it wasn't addressed because it absolutely was addressed, but your highest rated recruits in this class didn't come from the defensive line. I know Dominic McKinley is one that is yet to sign, and Brian Kelly had the visit with him this past weekend. He's planned a visit with LSU in January. He didn't sign on the early signing day. What's kind of the latest you're hearing in Dominic McKinley and how he can add a little bit of size and some depth to this defensive line?
We've been talking about him for a long time, haven't we,
Yeah,
Caroline?
we
D
have.
tackle, I believe he's at Acadiana High School, Lafayette area. Look, you can't lose the number one player in your state regardless. But when you're LSU, you need D lineman, and that's your historical position. It would look bad. He's been committed to A&M. Texas is the school right now, I think, would actually have the best shot from what the rumors are.
Mhm.
But Kelly has had a conversation with him. They're bringing him in for a visit next month. But I think Texas is as well. His recruitment is going to be wild all the way until like the 7th of February is when he can sign.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if that is as wild a recruitment as there is in the country between now and then.
I mean, that has been, and that's saying something too, because even
Oh.
since early signing day, just in the past couple of days, there has been some crazy movement. Players accused of not actually signing their national letter of intent. Wild and dramatic, always, every single year. So that is saying something, absolutely. But coming up next with Brian, I want to get into kind of the nitty gritty of this 2024 class. Maybe some of the shining stars in this class, get into some of the most important positions and key positions in this 2024 class. And we'll get into that coming up next with Brian Smith. Buying tickets to your favorite events can be stressful, but I am here to tell you it doesn't have to be. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all of the sporting events, music concerts, comedy shows, and theater events near you. They've got last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. We are just a few days away from Christmas, so if you're looking for that perfect gift, go to Game Time and give the gift of a really great experience. I actually did that for a loved one in my life. I went to Game Time to get tickets for our favorite team so we could go together, and it's going to be a great experience. And Game Time made the ticket buying experience so easy and so transparent. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. So that is why Game Time is my go-to. I know exactly what our view is going to be like at the event, and I know that I'm getting the lowest price guaranteed. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Brian Smith is with us for an early signing day recap. A couple of players that I want to break down with you. First and foremost, a player that you know well from the state of Florida, LSU's 2024 class quarterback, Colin Hurley. Now, one thing that I always like to remind people is that Colin reclassified. So originally in the 2025 class, now signing in the 2024 class. Just what do you know about Colin Hurley and how big it is landing that quarterback in this 2024 class?
I've known him since he was getting ready to be a freshman there and play at Trinity. He's a kid that was a prodigy. Everybody knew he was going to be special. He was homeschooled, went to one of the best programs in Jacksonville, but he also trained at 6 Points, a place where MLB pitchers go, etc. I once got a video from him of him pushing 1,000 pounds on a sled, including one of the New York Yankees pitchers sitting on top of it. So he's a very unique kid, very motivated. He's got a cannon for an arm, and he's a guy that's 6'1", 220 pounds and no body fat. I mean, he looks like he's 20 years old, but he's actually a year early for his class. So he knows he's going to come in redshirt, but he's got a chance to long-term to be a great player in a Tigers uniform. And he loved the vibe there. He liked Denbrock and everybody. And he knows he's going to have receivers if he goes there. He's not stupid. He knows the two positions are married. Mm-hmm. So I think he's going to do very well in a Tigers uniform. People are going to like him.
And he's been one in particular that has been super outspoken on social media and kind of doing the helping out Frank Wilson and this whole LSU recruiting staff of doing his own recruiting on social media.
That's not really surprising. He wants to win.
Yeah.
You know, he wants to come in and compete and win. And he always went and played in the biggest tournaments in 7-on-7 and everything. And he always wanted the best players to come play with him. He's just continuing that to college. Why not? That's what you should do.
And kind of speaking of the quarterback position, I don't think we've talked about this yet. AJ Swan transferring to LSU. Not what I expected in the slightest, but I think LSU needed a more experienced veteran backup quarterback just as insurance to push Garrett Nussmeier in camp, just based off of what you know from Colin Hurley. I think that's been kind of a concern for some LSU fans is, well, you already got a crowded quarterback room. You have Ricky Collins that's coming back for his redshirt freshman year. You have Colin Hurley coming into the fold. Based off of what you know about Colin Hurley, maybe what would his perspective or reaction be to bringing in yet another quarterback ahead of him in that room?
I don't think he'll really care.
Yeah.
To be really honest with you, he knows he's probably going to redshirt his first year. After that, it's the SEC. Wherever you go, I've had that conversation with him and his dad. It's like, it's going to be competitive. You just kind of have to work your way through it. I don't think it's going to change his opinion of LSU at all.
And I don't think that it should. And that's kind of, I've been talking some LSU fans off a ledge here of, look, you can't not make a decision or bring in a player that's going to make your team better out of fear of what other players might think. You got to do what's best for your team. What you got to do what's best to win football games. You're one Garrett Nussmeier, knock on wood, injury away from Ricky Collins potentially having to take over and take the keys to the car. But looking back at this 2024 class, the highest rated recruit in the class is Trey'Dez Green, a tight end, 4-star tight end out of Zachary, Baton Rouge area. When LSU hired Brian Kelly, one thing I was really intrigued to see how he would develop one position group is the tight end position group. Historically, LSU's not really a powerhouse tight end program, but Brian Kelly has some of the best track records with tight ends of any other coach in college football. I'm excited to see what Trey'Dez Green can become at LSU, Brian.
He can do a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. He can be a flex tight end. He can be an inline guy. You could use him in motion, but he makes plays after the catch too. So, hey, if the kid's right down the street from you, even if you don't normally throw to tight ends, I would go after that guy. So he's a top 5 tight end by anybody's measures. And again, he's from Zachary. It's right down the road. So you got to recruit him. They got him early. I think he'll play early too, because LSU needs more help there. They need more playmakers, and he can help alleviate. They lost some talent at receiver.
Yeah.
So that they'll take anything they can get to kind of gloss that over. And he's one of the guys that might do it.
I'm excited to see what he can do because that's one position group that I think maybe was underutilized this past year. And I have zero critiques and zero complaints of LSU's offense this past year. But I
Sure,
think
yeah.
that was a result of a veteran quarterback with veteran receivers, and the deep ball, the long ball game fit this personnel and fit the style that Jaden Daniels and Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors could play so well. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Garrett Nussmeier and this new group of receivers. I think they're going to have to utilize the tight end position a little bit more. They kind of have the check down go to guy that's not 40, 50 yards downfield.
Yeah, let's be honest. Jaden had a very unique skill set.
Mhm.
He did everything wrong, openly talked about it. He held the ball too long, etc., and got away with it. I don't think too many guys have his athleticism because he ran away from guys in the SEC. Nussmeier's not doing that.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to change their offense dramatically. But this is a more normal quarterback, and Denbrock has been through that before. They'll be okay. It's just going to take a little longer to score.
Yeah.
It might be 8 play and 10 play drives instead of 3 to 5. So
The
it is
3 to
what it
5 plays were so fun, though.
is. I know.
Those quick 35-second drives, those were fun. Those were absolutely fun. Looking at the other side of the ball, Deshaun McBride. He is a safety out of Denham Springs, also Baton Rouge area, 4-star safety. We've talked about it ad nauseum. It just, that secondary just absolutely drives me crazy. And it's a position group that needs depth and it needs playmakers right now. Is Deshaun McBride maybe a guy that can help out this DB room right now?
I don't see how he won't be given the utmost of opportunities. Look, they don't have the numbers that they need. They did get Sage Ryan to come back. I don't know where he's going to play. Hopefully it's not corner, but they need as many guys competing as possible.
Yeah.
Where the chips fall, if you're Brian Kelly and the staff, whatever, how many bullets do you have in the gun? That's what this is about. He's another guy that's going to come in and compete. He's a local kid. It'll mean something to him. He's 20 minutes from campus where he grew up. That's a big deal to wear the purple and gold. And he's long, 6'2", 195, 200, something like that. He's at a program that's used to going against top competition. I bet you he plays pretty early. You might even see him on the kickoff unit on the first play of next season. He's that kind of athlete. They'll just throw him out there. Hopefully for them, though, they can play some experienced guys and get 1 or 2 more guys from the portal so he's not keyed on to start. Don't want to see freshmen starting in the deep secondary in the SEC.
We saw that this past year, and it's no disrespect to those guys, but that's not what you need at LSU. At least get Jordan Gilbert, safety from Texas A&M, out of the transfer portal. But I thought that was just scratching the surface. You need a couple of more guys. You need more experience. In addition to the depth that you have maybe in the younger side of things. All right, I mentioned Deshaun McBride. I mentioned Trey'Dez Green and Colin Hurley in the 2024 class. Who's maybe one name, one guy in particular that I didn't mention that might not be a household name for LSU fans quite yet that you really like in this 2024 class?
Well, there's a couple. Jelani Watkins, the receiver. He's out of Humble, Texas, just outside of Houston. He's not the biggest guy, but he can fly. He's a 5'9", 160 guy. He can really, really play. I've seen him in the 7-on-7 circuit. I also think that there's a lot of chances for several of these kids to play, by the way. This is still an LSU recruiting class. But Tylen Singleton, he's from Manning, Louisiana. It's not right around the Baton Rouge area. He's a hybrid linebacker. He can play some strong safety probably. I bet you he finds his way onto the field pretty early. They need help at linebacker too. So yeah. Tylen Singleton's a kid to watch.
All right, coming up next, I want to take a look around the SEC because there have been some programs that are making some moves in the transfer portal and on early signing day, and we will get into that coming up next, right here on Locked On LSU. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders. I mean, for example, we've got a Dallas Cowboys game on Christmas Eve playing the Dolphins in Miami with those two offenses. I'm going to take the over on that game, but that's my take. Do it how you want to do it. Just do it with FanDuel. Visit fanduel.com/locked-on and kick off the NFL season. Again, that's fanduel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU, an early signing day reaction podcast with Locked On's official recruiting insider, Brian Smith. Brian, I don't know what Lane Kiffin is promising. I don't know what's in the water in Oxford, but Lane Kiffin in Ole Miss has snagged Tyler Barron via the transfer portal, edge rusher from Tennessee. They Princely Umama-Yellen, another edge rusher from Florida. Juice Wells, wide receiver from South Carolina. And all signs point toward Walter Nolan, one of the top defensive players in the country, transferring away from Texas A&M, potentially landing at Ole Miss. They had a big early signing day as well. I don't know what's going on at Ole Miss. First of all, I'm impressed at what Lane Kiffin is doing. Second of all, as an LSU fan, I'm kind of scared at what Lane Kiffin's building in Oxford.
They're trying to get some defensive help more than anything else, and Nolan would be obviously the icing on the cake. I'm not scared of saying this. Kiffin's an offensive guy. His defenses have always been iffy. They've looked like LSU's did last year too consistently, but this is why you go get the NIL packages from the boosters, and that's what this is. Let's just cut to the chase. Juice Wells is a nice help too. He's a good receiver, but this is about the defensive players.
Yeah,
they're going to make the playoff quite possibly next year, and they might beat the Bayou Bengals along the way. And normally I don't really think much about Ole Miss beating LSU. They really might do it again. I mean, like, go out there and win. They're getting players they don't normally get. And it's NIL package stuff. There's no doubt about it.
I look at Ole Miss and Missouri being two programs that aren't traditional powerhouses, just kind of middle of the road programs that have benefited so greatly from NIL and the transfer portal. And whenever this new era of college football began, I viewed it as, all right, the rich are getting richer. The Bamas, the Georgias, the A&Ms, the Ohio States, the Michigans, they're just going to get bigger. But honestly, Brian, I don't really think that's been the case. I think it's been more of a trickle down where now the riches are being spread around just a little bit more.
There's truth in that on the outside, but there's two parts of it. Number one, the talent is spread around a little bit.
Yeah.
But let's use Georgia and Bama as an example. They don't like the NIL up front because they're worried about screwing up their locker room. Mm-hmm. If you're Ole Miss, you got to take more chances.
Yeah.
Ole Miss fans can throw rocks at this podcast if they want for me saying that, but you're not recruiting like Bama or Georgia. You're not. You're not going to sniff what they do. The only way they're going to do it is through that. Mm-hmm. Sorry, it's just true. So that's part of it. And then the other part, if you're Bama, and you will give it for a specific kid. And LSU will do it for a specific kid. Mm-hmm. But at LSU, you don't have to do it up front. You want to come here and earn it? NIL, I'm sure there are plenty of opportunities. If you go run for 300 yards in a game, I'm sure there's somebody that's going to give you a sponsorship.
Right.
It's just like any other program, but they want you to get there and do it first. So it depends. Like the deal they got in your home state up there in Missouri. I mean, that's a weird deal with what they're doing with the high school kids.
Yeah.
I don't know how sustainable it is for Missouri to be good in this and keep their locker room. That's what I want to know. 1 year is one thing, but I already know at a couple other schools, I'm going to leave the names out. When somebody got money and it gets into the locker room, then people got mad. There's been some schools, kids left. And now the program has like not a hole at a position. Mm-hmm. They have a hole because like a couple of guys left. And it's signing days by. Mm-hmm. This is not good. So you got to be really careful for what you ask for.
I've said transfer portal is great for building a team, but you can't build a program exclusively through the transfer portal or so heavy via the transfer portal. One thing to maybe make LSU fans feel a little bit better, Florida. That is might be all I need to say about what's going on in Gainesville. I mean, whenever Florida fans or just college football fans would say Florida needs to move on from Billy Napier, I'm thinking, look, they've got the number 3 recruiting class in the country, at least at the time they did. They're recruiting at a high level. They've got a bunch of really talented young players. Like, just give Billy Napier some time. Well, now the one star that I could put on Billy Napier's resume of recruiting at an incredibly high level, they've lost a lot of talent, or at least they've lost a lot of committed, talented players.
Look, they lost Amaris Williams, who's as talented a D lineman in the country. Jamonte Waller, they both went to Auburn, so that's not very helpful for them. And they also lost a receiver to A&M. They lost, other players that could have helped them. They lost a Darius Hayes, a lifelong Gator fan, on signing day to Miami. I mean, it was bad. They dropped like 8 spots or something in like a week. That's hard to do, Caroline. That is really hard to do. They're on life support, but they did get DJ Lagway, and that's a great quarterback prospect out of Willis, Texas. And they got a few other kids, but I mean, like they lost Philsme, the kid from Texas, that flipped over to the Longhorns. I don't know if I've ever seen a team collapse quite like that in the way they did. It was just a slow bleed for like a month. So they got a couple kids at the end too. It was just bizarre.
Is that money? Is that
part of it? But I mean, they got NIL, and
yeah,
some of the kids I think they just sucked on the field was the problem.
Maybe so. So
yeah, they were bad.
Before we wrap up here, I want to get your one winner and loser from the SEC on early signing day.
Texas would be my biggest winner. Florida's the easy one for the biggest loser. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. Texas, the reason I say it, I think they've recruited well enough now. I mean, you knew Sark was going to get talent on the perimeter, but they're recruiting in the trenches well enough, and a linebacker, et cetera, that they're pretty close to what Bama and Georgia are.
Right.
This isn't going to be a flash in the pan for them going to the playoff. And I know you're by no means a Texas fan by any stretch of the imagination, but
that is correct.
But they are going to be around for the long term. This program's here to stay.
Where does LSU fit in that? Maybe your rankings of success on early signing day.
They're just below the very top tier, but there's 2 or 3 guys left that are elite.
Yeah.
Like if they got Bussey and they got Dominic McKinley, that's a top 7 class. They're just not done yet, so I can't rate it. The key with them, and we won't say this very often, how many top-end guys, especially on defense, did the Bayou Bengals get in the portal? They only need a couple, but they got to be high-end. And if they do that, they could be in the top 10 next year. If they don't, they're probably looking at an 8-4 season. It's just the way it is. I know that you don't want to hear that, but I'm realistic. Like their defense is atrocious.
It's awful.
There's a lot of pieces. The good news is I've heard some really positive trends about some certain defensive linemen coming back, but we'll see. Until they do, I never believe it when there's possible NFL money involved. I need to see it first.
Who would be those top end transfer portal guys defensively that you think LSU should go after?
Well, I mean, Walter Nolan was one, but I just don't think they're willing to match the kind of, like, they don't want to do it the same way. And he's looking for NIL money.
Yeah.
So that's awkward. I think it'll probably be as much spring portal as anything else, but there's probably like Oregon just took a kid from like Northwest Missouri State that they're high on. And I'm like, what? So, I mean,
my cousin plays football there.
Oh, really?
See?
That's wild. But I don't know. I mean, if it's gold is where you find it.
Yeah.
They got to find somebody that helps them on that back end. They got to get more experience. And if they do lose one of the guys up front, maybe they got to get another portal guy. They do have Sean Washington coming in, the big JC kid that's a New Orleans guy. But they need defensive help. They need a couple of kids, whether it's now or in the spring. They got to have it.
Brian Smith, we appreciate you as always. Get some sleep after this week. I know it's been a grind. Appreciate your time. Where can the people find more of your National Signing Day content?
At FB Scout _Florida on X. It's going to be all over Locked On Network with as many shows as I've done today and will be over the next week. So it's going to be fun, kind of analyzing some of this. And now we get to actually talk about football and the bowl games. We'll see how that goes. But football is here for a couple more months. We need to enjoy it.
Need to enjoy every single game. Brian, appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on next week's edition of Locked On LSU, a very special Christmas edition. Plus, we'll look ahead to LSU's bowl matchup against the Wisconsin Badgers. Have a happy weekend. Have a very happy, healthy, and safe holiday to everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single day.